The Democratic primary for New York City mayor is the biggest election in the country right now. The top two candidates, former Governor Andrew Cuomo and my personal favorite, Zohran Mamdani, want to take the city in two very different directions. No matter who wins the election, how will that impact the rest of the country? We're going to find out on this episode of Not Suitable for Democracy. Welcome to Not Suitable for Democracy. I'm your host, Nick, and today we are going to be talking about the biggest election in New York City's history, the New York City Mayoral Primary. Now, to tell y'all all about it, I've got my friend Jason Reyes to share his insight and what we can tell you about what's going on right here in New York City. So, Jason, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm really excited about today.
Oh my gosh, me too. So now remind me, what do you do when you're not talking about politics like me, like a, loser?
Well, I make music and I work in marketing as well. I've been living in New York City since 2010, specifically in Astoria.
Hey, there you go. So, I just hit 10 years in Astoria, so this neighborhood has changed so much. Just curious though, what's like the biggest change you've seen in this neighborhood during your time in this amazing spot?
So this is funny. I have seen so many restaurants come and go. So many. I've seen a lot of weird high-risey buildings in the middle of nowhere. Have you noticed these?
Yes.
Like in the most random spots. But overall, I think my favorite thing about Astoria is that restaurants are changing all the time, but we have some of the best food, period.
This is true.
This is no joke over here. Seriously, anytime something new opens up, there's always a line. Everyone wants to go. Everyone wants to try it. We're all like a community of foodies. And that's why I love Astoria as much as I do. So I would say that's the big key change that I always see.
That is so true. I'll say this real quick. My husband and I, we do love to go out to eat. So just the fact of bringing up food right now, Zohran is even given some good food recos on the campaign trail. So it is no joke. If you ever want to go out to eat, Astoria is where it's at. All right, so speaking of, the fact that we are in the middle of one of New York City's biggest elections in a really long time. So what do I mean by that? Well, first, let me just drop a few numbers for you. Number one, we've got 9 candidates, or 11 candidates, I think, running in this Democratic primary that has already begun with early voting. Early voting started this past Saturday, June 14th. Early voting, the first day of early voting, doubled since the 2021 mayoral primary. So that's already a really good sign. Number 2, since the first 3 days of early voting and the timing of recording of this podcast, it is crazy. We've seen a 115% increase. That is wild. That is unheard of. So from 2021 to 2025, people are coming out to vote. So Jason, first off, have you voted yet?
Yeah, I absolutely voted. I voted as early as I possibly could. I went straight over to my early polling site, which is the Museum of the Moving Image. It's a wonderful place if you've never been. We got there pretty early. I dragged my partner out of bed and we went to go vote. I did my rankings. And it was it's really easy to vote in this neighborhood, which is something that I really love.
Oh yeah.
You hear horror stories all the time about difficulty voting, but I've never in the years that I've lived here, I've never had an issue with that. So that's a plus. How about you?
Yeah, no, exactly the same. It's funny because I went on Sunday and it was raining on Saturday. So my husband and I, we decided to go early vote, then go get breakfast at one of the places, because we love food. So figured make a little morning event out of it, right? But yeah, we went Sunday because early voting, if you can, vote before election day because you won't have to really wait online, way less people, and hopefully that helps. So now that people are coming out to vote, thank you so much for being a voter, Jason, and make sure that you vote. Registered Democrats, get out and vote. So with that said, we are seeing high turnout. Now, there could be many theories, but I think we both know why. So Jason, what's your theory why you think we might be seeing high voter turnout this election?
There's just a lot of energy in this race.
Yes.
There's a lot of dynamic candidates. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of and anti-Cuomo energy. There's a lot of people who just don't want to do that. There's a need for like generational change. There's just a lot of energy this time around. And I think a lot of people coalesced around disliking our current mayor.
Oh,
And, you know, everybody's kind of over that. So there's been a sense of energy around exploring different candidates and trying to, you know, shop around for the right one. But has been a lot of momentum, and it's leaning progressive, which is something that I'm really excited to see.
oh boy, me too. And the fact that we actually have a variety of progressives in the field this year, you know, I think it also speaks to what we're seeing from the current administration, where they have just let so many people down that we know we cannot have a mayor with like the similar level of or type of I don't want to say governorship, but mayoralty, let's say. So, you know, we've got Adrian Adams, Brad Lander, Zelnor Myrie, right? We've got these great, formidable candidates who are really speaking to voters that we didn't really get last time around. So now that you did mention the anti-Cuomo energy, like, hey, if you ever heard of ABC, Anyone But Cuomo, or Dream, Don't Rank Evil Andrew for mayor, listen, make your acronym up, but it works, right? And we're actually seeing that in the results. How do I know that? If you look at some of the past polling, we know that when former Governor Cuomo first entered the race, he was polling, you know, with like what, plus 40%, plus 30%. He was like ahead of the field. But you've been following along as I have, and we have seen him slowly lose that lead, going down 20 points, 10 points. Now, the final numbers, the latest poll I think had him at down an 8-point difference between Cuomo number one and Zohran coming in second place. And that was back in May. And we are talking right now, June 2025. So we may see something very different on election night.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting about the Cuomo aspect of the race itself is people really recognize that name.
Yes.
People are very familiar with that dynasty. There is kind of a legendary kind of focus on the name. And I feel that as people kind of remember the era more, and as the campaign kind of spreads out and starts getting more face time with the public, people are starting to remember like, oh, I actually didn't like that era as much as I used to. I actually don't care for this, is like kind of the sentiment that I'm collecting from like who I engage with. And it's like, yeah, that's why that polling number has been kind of slipping little by little, on top of just the general like positive momentum that's coming out from the other candidates.
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like there's something for everyone, but not in a good way. So, for instance, if you are upset about crime and people usually criticize the bail reform, former Governor Cuomo signed that into law. If you are, you know, serious about the education system, former Governor Cuomo cut millions to our education here in New York City. If you're, you know, have concerns over public safety, well, former Governor Cuomo has not actually delivered those results when he was governor, and we have the, you know, crime rates to prove it. And not like Mayor Adams is doing a better job either. So point being, right, there's something for everyone to say, oh yeah, you know what? Maybe he's not the guy for us, and definitely not for us. So of course we love Zohran, but before we jump into the man of the hour, I do want to like kind of, you know, read the room, temperature check. Like, what other candidates have been on your radar in this election? Because it is ranked choice, so we can rank up to 5.
So, Lander, Stringer. You know, it's so funny. I want to take a moment to talk about Adrienne Adams actually really quickly.
Go for it.
Because she has a wonderful record.
Yes.
She is an accomplished individual.
Yes.
She legislates her ass off.
She does.
I think she's a really, really like positive force within the system. I just couldn't get behind her campaign. And that's the only reason she wasn't ranked higher for me.
Right.
I don't need to go into my numbers of rankings or anything, but like I really liked her record. And I felt that it just fell a little short on the campaign of expressing like what the idea is. And I think, I don't know about you, but for me, I think Zohran has done such an effective campaign in messaging. It's a very straight to the point, achievable, and here's how I'll do it, like campaign. And Adrienne Adams just didn't have that.
That's a really good point. And I'll share, some previous commentary on my previous episode, right? Like I shared how at the Queers for Action Forum, shout out to those organizers doing amazing work, when, City Council Speaker Adrienne Adams attended, you know, when she got most excited, and you'll see it in other forums and even on the debate stage, it's like the two debates. When she got most excited, that was when she was talking about Tish James and the endorsement she received, which is great. I mean, hey, AG, Tish James, she was not my choice in the primary back when she was first elected. I'm going to be honest. Zephyr Teach Out, doing amazing work. But now the fact that Tish James has, given her endorsement to Adrienne Adams definitely makes Adrienne Adams, a very formidable candidate and someone that we can trust. However, to Jason, to your point, like she wasn't excited about much else. I mean, it was kind of, Tish James's fight to fight about not getting Cuomo as mayor, but here we are.
Yeah.
So with that said, I agree with your assessment about Adrienne Adams. I'm also looking at Zohran Mamdani. I think he's done great work in the state Senate, especially around election reform. So shout out to him. He was definitely on my ranked ballot. Yes. And with that said, I feel like, the race will, one theory, what I see happening is that while Zohran and Cuomo are the top two candidates and they're gunning for the first position, we might see the race unfold in the lower tier candidates and how those voters are ranking Zohran or Cuomo. For instance, Zohran Mamdani had his second cross endorsement, and this time with Michael Blake. Michael Blake is not polling at the top of the pack, but this cross endorsement could be that same strategy where if Blake is able to then generate support for Zohran earlier in the rounds of voting, then there is a chance that Zohran can catch up to Cuomo and surpass him at that 50% threshold. So, now, the big question, do you think Zohran is going to win?
Honestly, yeah, I do, which is scary because like I've always gunned for the progressive and I've had my heart broken several times. I mean, I've been in politics pretty actively, aware of things since the 2016 Bernie Sanders campaign. We all know how that went. We all know how 2020 went. We clearly know how 2024 went, and everything local in between. We know how this works. But I actually believe that Zohran has it. And
You do?
yeah, 100%.
Wow, okay. That is exciting to hear. And I've had my heart let down so many times between Bernie Sanders 2020. I really thought Harris had it in the bag in 2024. I was out canvassing in Pennsylvania on election day for her. So to have that happen again with Zohran, I might take a week off from podcasting if that happens. But until then, we don't know. So, I have my reservations where, what's happening on the ground. We hear conversation about, Zohran's limited experience, right? That seems to be the number one critique, which is true, right? It's not a lie. But I do think that might not be what the majority of Zohran supporters are prioritizing or focused on. Like, we both support Zohran. How do you think experience or that argument is playing into your role or even into the electorate?
Well, I'm not going to diminish the fact that he's an assembly member, first and foremost, right? So he's already doing a job. He's not a disgraced former governor. So there's that, right? I will say the level of organizing that I have seen around this campaign specifically, the way that campaign has driven itself from 5% to a head-to-head with someone who had 100% name ID in the city is remarkable. And it shows a level of like tenacity and like just that grit. And I think at that point you have to give it to him because it seems like he's extremely capable of getting something done if he's determined to. And I think that the campaign is the proof positive on that. So if he wins, people say a lot about experience, but everybody's new at one point or another. If you look at AOC in 2018 to where she is now, we're talking about the same thing. Oh, this inexperienced bartender person would never win. And then she changed the denominator in that race and pulled out a massive victory by getting people who had never voted before to show up to the polls. And I feel like it's very similar energy that I'm seeing from Zohran. So experience, it's very subjective because people work and people do their jobs. And Zohran has been an effective assembly member for me since he's been in that seat. So to kind of dismiss all of that work is it's a bit of a smear from my perspective.
Oh, 100% agreed. And I'll add too, with experience, it's not necessarily that you need to have X number of years to be mayor, right? Because if that was the case, we would have those in law and like barely any, no one would then run because there are only very few people would actually be qualified. But we know that democracy is about the power of the people. So think about the past 2024 election. We saw how President Biden and even VP Harris, both qualified candidates, very experienced, but they turned out not to win. They did not run a campaign effectively with a message that resonated. But what we see with Zohran about experience, honestly, it all comes down to decision making. And you can tell that Zohran, between what he's communicating, how his campaign is being run, and how he's conducting himself with integrity and character, those are decisions that will be exemplified when he is the mayor of New York City. And I trust that he will be making good decisions for the greater good. So for me, I trust that, he's the right guy for the job, regardless, because if he's rising in the polls and he's only inches away from Cuomo, then what does that say about the other candidates who have more experience, right? So I think, Jason, to your point, it is subjective. And I think at the end of the day, we know what's best for us as voters. So I know you mentioned the message, right? We both know the message. Zohran wants to freeze the
Rent.
He wants to make buses fast and
Free.
And he is all about getting universal
childcare.
There's your platform. Boom. Hey. That being said, I can't say I know about any of the other platforms from the candidates that succinctly or strongly.
I will say Myri's very consistent about the after school care. He is very consistent about that message. He will drive it home. You could ask him about city bikes and he will convert it to that message about after school care. He is very committed to that message. He's one of the prime examples. Harkening back really quickly to the experience critique. We have seen the Democratic Party with leadership that has spanned decades. Yeah. And we are not in a better situation as a party than we were 10 years ago, than we were 15 years ago. So when you think about experience, what are we really talking about? The people who have built-in relationships, who are doing favors for each other? Are we talking about like, I know how to slap backs in order to get deals for friends? Like, is that the kind of experience that is worthwhile? That's what you get from Cuomo. So I just feel like this whole he's inexperienced stuff is just so inauthentic because it's really just about protecting entrenched politicians.
That's a really good point, Jason. And, I'll just share this really quick. On that second debate, when the moderator asked Cuomo, how would he stop Trump's immigration policies from coming to New York City? And his answer was basically, because I said so. And that's not an answer. Imagine if Zohran said that, he would get slaughtered. But Zohran's answer was great, talking about an investment of 200 immigration lawyers, right, to protect families. And there's an increase where you can reconnect and reunify families with that investment, right? So there's so many ways that Zohran is, countering the narrative with strong policy ideas. So you got to hand it to him. Other elements that you particularly enjoy about Zohran's campaign?
I mean, he's killing it with the social media stuff. Like, he's just killing it because the messaging is so clear. It's so easy to share. And the way that he targets different audiences with specific messaging is really, really driving the engagement and letting people. It's like one thing for us because we're policy wonks and we're really into this, but to be able to share videos that are driving home the political message because they're funny, because they're comical, they're engaging, they're something that you actually want to share, but is also kind of blanketing the message is like, it's so good that like you really can't compete with it. If you don't have a clear message, you can't have fun with it.
Right.
you're always triangulating. You're like, what do I say to this specific audience, and who am I trying to appeal to? And well, I can't say too much because of X, Y, and Z. And like, because you're always in this triangulation mode, you can't have fun with your messaging. Because Zohran has his messaging clear, concise, to the point, easy to digest, he can just have fun every day, just making videos, driving it home, and in different funny ways for different audiences, and you want to engage with it.
Absolutely. And I just want to say shout out to Melted Solids. That's the agency that's been doing the amazing work of those videos. Obviously, they are gaining so much traction online. I want to ask, do you have a favorite video or one that, like, you know, you keep rewatching just because it has like a little bit of flair, a little bit of fun, or anything in particular? Mine personally was the video Zohran did where he was speaking Hindu while explaining ranked choice voting, pouring the juice in the cups. Like, I mean, come on, that was pretty clever and like creative. And the little there's like I think when Zohran wins in that ranked choice voting, there's like this really cheesy graffiti, like ta-da, and it's just like the nature of it. It's just like he gets it that he's not super serious, he's having fun, and it's like that's the vibe.
Yeah, all the ones that have like the funny graphics that it's like your uncle made this on Facebook. Yeah. I love those. The one that you just mentioned is one of my favorites. Okay, so there's two. There's one where he's just doing the whole thing in Spanish, which I love because it's like, okay, girl, you can speak Spanish? All right. But then my favorite is the follow-up to that, where he shows the outtakes of like trying to speak Spanish. And he's like, it's like he's nailing it, but he's so unsure of himself while he's nailing it. And it's like, oh, this is adorable. You know what I mean? So those are like the two that came to mind immediately. Yeah, I mean, he's just so good at this.
Yeah. And I love it. And I think what you were describing right there was, what's that word? I think it's called authenticity, right? I mean, you can't recreate that. So good for him. So with all of that said, right, now Zohran, again, he's running an amazing campaign. His volunteers, his organizers, his team, they are just doing the most. And I really genuinely hope that we have a win on election night. And even, like, let's say he gets really close, right? If the polls are saying he's down by a few points, this will have moved the progressive movement so far in New York City, but beyond our wildest dreams. So for those of us who weren't there for the New York 14 election when AOC got elected in 2018, this right now is that election for all of New York City. So if by some odd chance that maybe we come up short, that doesn't mean that the work would not have set us up for a stronger election or even many elections in the general election for New York City. But even like, think about 2026, right? So what kind of ramifications or positive impact, actually, what positive impact will Zohran's campaign not just have on the primary, but have on the Democratic Party as a whole?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's this. I don't know how wonky we can be here, but
as much as you'd love to.
I'm gonna be pretty wonky. There is this battle right now when it comes to 2026 and the messaging of the Democratic Party between the abundance between abundance and just left-leaning genuine politics. I don't know if it's DSA necessarily, but just progressive politics. Capital P progressive politics rather than just lowercase p progressive. And those two factions are kind of fighting for the soul of the party right now. Yeah. And in Zohran's most recent rally, he had a quote related to abundance in it, which I thought was really smart, because if he takes the mayor's seat, he proves positive that like simple, effective working class economic issues are the way to win. Yes. I think AOC and Bernie Sanders fight the oligarchy messaging is the winner, and those are the factions that are fighting. The abundance versus the fight the oligarchy factions, right? The fact that Zohran started to kind of fold in the abundance messaging is really good because it co-ops the abundance messaging into the fight the oligarchy messaging, right? It folds it in. It becomes a unified message. Like, yeah, we can have abundance, but we're talking about deregulation for X, Y, and Z that benefits working people. You know what I mean?
For those who may not be familiar with that debate between abundance and populism, do you want to share maybe some of the key tenets across both and why we are both pro-populists and why the move to include abundance was clever for Zohran?
Sure. I'm going to try my best here. There's going to be better people that are better than me at this. But Ezra Klein wrote a book about abundance. I don't want to say it's just political messaging, but it's kind of just like a way of life in politics, where the root causes of issues from his perspective is like well-meaning liberals kind of overcomplicating the bureaucracy of getting things done. His perspective is like it takes 50 different layers of paperwork and approvals just to like build I don't want to say build a high-speed rail. Sure.
So one example on that, Zohran actually used on the campaign trail. Well, he said that for a small business owner to start their own barbershop, they have to go through 24 different, I might be butchering this, but it's like 24 agencies, 7 different documents, and like a few other series of events that you need to go through just to open a barbershop, which just complicates the bureaucratic entire process and really, hinders people actually wanting to, dream their dream, especially in New York City.
Yeah, no, that's the perfect example, actually, because so their theory of the case is that it's too much bureaucracy, and the root cause of that bureaucracy and slowdown is well-meaning liberals trying to make everything fair and square. I don't agree with that. I think there is a lot of bureaucracy and I think there's a lot of corruption that creates an unintended overwrought process. There are people who have public-private partnerships in order to get things done. You're setting up all these contracts with all these private people. These are friends of people, and they're all trying to make money. And I think that is the complication of our current state. And that is more akin to the populist messaging, right? We have these donors donating to campaigns. They're asking for contracts to manage something for the city. That creates all this weird bureaucracy. It creates a bunch of red tapes. It creates zoning weirdness. That's the real crux of the issue. And my issue with abundance is that it doesn't name that explicitly. It puts the onus on like liberalism, which is fair to a certain extent, but that's not the root cause. And we know that the root cause is money in politics.
Absolutely. And that is why I am not for the abundance message, because it leaves out that core reason. Yes, there's bureaucratic hurdles that people have to hop over, but part of them, for instance, the example Ezra Klein even uses in his book is that the fact that, President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure act that was passed, they weren't able to, they boasted as a policy win, broadband access to rural communities. Now that is something that should be applauded and something that is, proud to stand on. However, what Ezra Klein argues is that it was not able to be successfully executed because there were too many, basically policy hurdles that certain broadband companies had to go through, and the fact that the people who had to receive the free broadband had to apply for it, and only a tiny percent of those who applied actually got it. So it's like you stand in front of the country saying it's a policy win, but it's only affecting a fraction of the people that you're boasting it's helping. So it's not good for Democrats, let alone any governorship or presidency, to be governing that way. But what Ezra Klein leaves out, so one good thing that Ryan Grimm had clarified, so he is an amazing journalist. Please support his work wherever he is, and he's normally on Breaking Points too, so make sure to check him out on that. But with that said, and Drop Site News, that too. So Ryan does great work, and he had clarified that the bureaucratic hurdles that Ezra Klein had failed to mention is that a lot of those hurdles were created by Republicans, that they added that in the bill because they were honoring their corporate donors who were the big internet providers. So, Ezra Klein makes a good point about, removing the hurdles, but he totally forgot why those hurdles existed in the first place. So again, that's why I'm a populist, right? We need to be combating wealth inequality, which, fun fact, the wealth inequality in this country is so bad, it's as comparable to as it was right before the French Revolution. That's all I'm saying. Like, it's really that bad these days. Why do you think Zoran's inclusion of abundance is so clever at this time?
Because it ties together the populace with the abundance factor, because we can agree and align that there is too much bureaucracy. There's a lot of junk flying around inside of the process. Like, for example, when you mentioned opening up a barbershop takes approvals from 20 something plus. It's crazy to have a small business owner who's just starting trying to figure that out. And who helps them? Private businesses who expedite processes for you. And there's a whole monetization process to accelerate you through the bureaucracy, right? So there's little cottage industries built into the way things are right now. And that's why Zoran co-opting it is so smart, because he can also agree with you and say, hey, there is a bunch of red tape here. We need to cut all that to make it easier for small businesses. We're all aligned with that. But the root cause is like bad landlords and donations to politicians. And like, that's the real thing that Ezra's abundance theory is not identifying purposefully.
Yeah, and you'll hear too that some strategists have said this concept of abundance is a new rebrand for the Democratic Party to, convey the idea that abundance, more of everything, is better for everyone. So of course that would draw more people into the party, making them seem, like they know what they're doing, even though these days I can't even confidently say that.
Abundance is the reheated nachos of neoliberalism, right? Like, that's what we're talking about here. It's just a rebrand of what they've already been doing.
So with that said, seeing how Zoran's message will resonate in New York City Democrats, right? This is a closed primary. How that resonates then with the country, between populism and abundance, two competing factions within the Democratic Party, and how that will resonate at large. Well, if the Democratic Party is currently very much unliked and they go with abundance, and if people aren't gonna resonate with that, and if, let's say, they don't understand, or if that doesn't actually solve the wealth inequality issue, we might be looking at Republicans governing for another 10, 15 years, maybe even 20. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, we're in for a reckoning. It's make or break for the party itself right now. The 2026 midterms and this mayor's race that we're dealing with right now is also a major reaction to the presidency of Donald Trump. People are looking on the streets, they're seeing ICE, they're seeing all the stuff that's going on in the city, and they're very concerned, scared. They feel unsafe in the subway station. There's like all these like kind of general things that are going on, and it's looming over the presidency at the moment. So there's a lot more active people paying attention more than you typically would see. They're looking for answers from the Democratic Party. How are you going to respond to this? What are you doing? Be fighters. And they're not seeing a lot of energy coming from our leadership as much as they feel that they should be fighting. It's not happening. And that's a huge factor in whether or not the party can win. Because I do think the theory of the case from the Democratic leadership is we don't need to do too much. The people are on our side, and we'll probably take back the House and the Senate in 26 without a lot of effort. And I feel like they are strongly mistaken in that regard. I feel like if you don't show up, fight back, come up with some ideas, try to get things done, try to stop the administration from doing what they're doing at every step, you're not gaining the trust of your voters. I feel like that is what happened in 2024.
Absolutely, 100% agree with that. And the fact that right now, even within the party itself, over at the DNC, they, I want to say this correctly, David Hogg had decided not to run for re-election after the DNC invalidated the election that elected both David Hogg and Malcolm Kenyatta to the vice chair seats, leadership in the DNC. So then, for those of you who know, obviously, it's happening. But with David Hogg, he's threw down to commit $20 million with his Leaders We Deserve PAC to primary challenge the asleep at the wheel Democrat incumbents who have been in their seat for far too long and haven't shown a strong record to keep them in office. So the fact that the party, sure, it was based on like they didn't follow the gender inclusion rules when they had the election, so it invalidated the results. So they had to redo it. But that being said, Hogg chose not to because he pissed off so many party leaders that they knew they wouldn't reelect him. And it's not really because they hated Hogg, but also think about who is in the DNC. I don't think a lot of people realize this, but right now the DNC delegates who vote in that election for David Hogg, Malcolm Kenyatta, and Ken Martin, majority of them were Biden delegates. The last time any of them were even elected to become a delegate was the 2024 primary. And who ran in that primary? Well, it was Joe Biden and technically Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson, but they made an effort to exclude anyone from running or to suppress them because the point was Biden's got to run for re-election so he wins in 2024. And here we are. So with that said, let's make sure that we are challenging people to do better for us because we can't have 4 more years of this.
Yeah, I agree. The whole situation with David Hogg was very tenuous. It was very interesting to see that unfold the way that it did. Obviously, as vice chair, I understand that there is, from their perspective, a conflict of interest. You're supposed to be representing the Democratic Party as a whole as vice chair and finding out ways to support them and fund them and help them win. It is, from their perspective, counterproductive to have challengers to incumbents. I understand that perspective. I get it. My thing is, if you really want to win your races, you should put forward the best horse. And I feel like that was his argument for the case, but we are dealing with a DNC that does not move or change or adapt or fight. We are dealing with people who have been relying on a consultant class who tells them what they want to hear and only what they want to hear. And we have a media cycle that washes that repetition into the minds of voters. It is a very well-oiled machine, and it does not like to be challenged. So when David Hogg said, you know what, you've been in your seat 25, 30 years and you haven't done anything. There's a 24-year-old in your district who's dope. I'm going to give that person $1 million, and that person's going to be the person I back. And that was a bridge too far for the party. And I feel like that's indicative of the problem that we're having with the party now, right? Because we're talking about entrenched politicians who have been leading this party down the ditch that we're in. They still act like it's 1998. And it's insane. It's insane that they think they could just like learn how to dance on TikTok and that'll convince people that they're doing stuff. I feel like the core messaging that they took, like if you look at 2024 from their perspective, it's like with Kamala's run, it was like, she was doing great with all the little TikTok things. Let's teach all of our 80-year-old congressmen how to do TikTok things, and then people will like us. It's like, guys, you literally tried to ban TikTok like 3 months prior. So like, who are you fooling, right? Like, this is absurd. It's so dumb. That's their response to losing the election. It's not the audit, right? It's not, how did we get here? Why did we let Joe Biden run again? Why did we not put a stop to this? Why did we massage and consult away all of the concerns that were plainly in the eyes of the voters who were looking at an old, feeble old man who could not go up the stairs without an escort like he's Mariah Carey? It was absurd. Okay. And you turn on the news and they're like, he's as sharp as a tack. He's the first one in and the last one out. And it's like, girl, I have never seen him out of the house after 7. I am concerned with him eating soup. What are we talking about? Like, no. When they finally, they basically canceled the primary, right? Exactly. They didn't want any rabble rousers, and they certainly did not want him in front of a microphone doing a debate at a primary level with anybody. That was just not happening. So here's where we are. In the last ditch effort, we get Kamala Harris, and they tie her down, and they tell her she cannot make any moves or adjustments that differ from Joe. This is time and time again, this leadership of the Democratic Party is proving that it does not want to be challenged. It will not change. It does not change. You have to change the party by force. And that's where we are in the 2026 midterms. We either change it or we have to figure out a different way forward.
Tying it all back now, you know who the 2028 presidential candidate is going to be for the Democratic Party, right? New York City's, if he wins, mayor, former Governor Cuomo, Andrew Cuomo. They will put up Andrew Cuomo for 2028 if he wins his New York City mayoral primary, because that is what they're going for. Because to your point, he is the most established candidate. He is the most pay-to-play transactional. He is going to be raising the most money from corporate interests and billionaires. Like, he is that guy. So, like, he doesn't want new leadership. He's been in the public eye for so many years, and he's definitely succeeded in that horrible corrupt system that is refusing to change. So why would he want it to change? And he's running to be our mayor. So end of the day, this is why we must stay engaged, must stay informed, must go out to vote. And if you live in New York City and you're a registered Democrat, please, please, please rank Zohran Mamdani number 1 for New York City mayor. Rank 5 candidates. Yeah. We talked about a lot today, didn't we?
Yeah, we certainly talked about it a lot. And I have the second you said Andrew Cuomo's going to run for president, my mouth went dry. I was so furious over that statement. Hypothetical. If that's where we are in 2028, who else besides Andrew Cuomo would you like to see in that roster? I think from my perspective, I would love AOC to run. I think it serves her better to run for that than the Senate. I think she could win the Senate. I do think she could win the Senate if she chose to do so. But I think if Zohran wins for mayor, I think the political winds will shift. We can build on that momentum and that coalition and start really moving mountains. And she could use that energy to go straight to being a nominee for president. My concern is that we will have a Pete Buttigieg representing the abundance faction. And if it's Buttigieg, Cuomo, and AOC, that's a really hot race. And it could be a lot of fun to watch, but it's kind of don't rank evil Andrew Cuomo for mayor or whatever the acronym is. I forgot. Dream. Yeah, dream. It's going to be kind of the same vibe. And what are your thoughts on that?
So I have a lot of thoughts for that, but I do want to be respectful of our listeners' time. But I will say, of course. I mean, listen, we're going to talk about this way more when it gets closer. And this is only a tidbit, but I'll share this. I want to focus on the concerns I have, and we all have, about former disgraced Governor Andrew Cuomo, because if he wins the New York City mayoral seat, he will use it as a bully pulpit to pull the strings behind the scenes to ensure he could screw over AOC's candidacy for the Senate or for 2028, right? Because him in a position of power is no good. We cannot have that. So everyone who wants to see AOC 2028, you got to get Zohran in for mayor, because without him in that seat, the second most visible leadership position in the United States of America, that is a major power, even optics in terms of media and everything. So in terms of organizing power, if Zohran does win, that opens up the door to a bright, bright future with AOC in the future, and a lot of the other squad members, and a lot of the young progressives who are running around the country right now who are entering their races for 2026. This will be the headwinds they need. So if anyone out there wants to see a progressive future truly happen, please tell all your friends and family and neighbors and New Yorkers who are registered Democrats to please vote for Zohran. Early voting is now going on now through June 22nd, and election day is June 24th. So please, please, please go out and vote. All right, Jason, it's been a wild time. I really enjoyed this conversation. Do you have any other last thoughts that you want to share to our listeners and our watchers and our audience?
Yeah, I just really hope that everybody votes in this election. I want such high voter turnout in this election. I really think that we have a shot at something different because I've lived here since 2010. So I've seen de Blasio, I've seen Bloomberg.
Right.
I've encountered a lot of mayors who in some cases mean well and didn't do well, and in some cases were the worst and executed the worst stuff. And I think it would be so nice to have a progressive mayor, and the only way we can get that is everyone going out to vote.
Truly appreciate everything you've said. Totally agree. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jason. And for those at home, make sure to subscribe to Not Suitable for Democracy. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Or for more exclusive content, follow along on Instagram at NSFD_pod. And remember, democracy is not suitable without